Hello, everyone. This is Tony Lawson, CEO and co-founder of SHOPPE BLACK. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Ken Sutton, the CEO and co-founder of Yobe, voice technology company. And how are you doing today, Ken?
Good. Thanks for bringing me on here, Tony.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. So getting right into it, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to start your company?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm a little unconventional for a technology, founder, if you would. My background is not in technology. My background is actually in finance. As it usually works for these type of things, a sequence of events that ends up in something that you actually start as a company, right? I didn't come out with this idea of changing the world of voice. That's kind of where the market and the things that happened put me there. So the genesis of the technology was a buddy of mine and I were working in the studio on frequency manipulation. The background to that was his son is severely autistic and had a problem listening to music inside of a car, which is something that my buddy had a problem with. He's an audio engineer for a 3-letter large company that I can't mention on air. And so what it came down to was the way his autistic brain perceived frequencies made it difficult and uncomfortable for him to listen to the reverberations and the echoes that you would have in a closed environment like a car, right? And so we did some research and found that it was basically just frequency manipulation and the way he perceived frequencies. And so James, my buddy, went into the studio with, millions of dollars of equipment and started bending frequencies. And we started with music because it was all about music at the time. I spent my time around the music business for a while. He was a musician, worked in the space. Just thought that, his kids should be able to listen to music in a car, right? And along the way, James found the process that his son responded to. But when we listened to it with natural perception or non-augmented perception, what we heard was something different. It was spatial. It was like what 3D did for television. It was different, right? And we had an opinion. We've been in the music business for a while, so we kind of knew what things sounded like. Yeah. It was, okay, this is interesting. And out of the group, I'm the business guy, right? So he's like, Kenny, is there something you can do with this? And I'm like, I don't know. There's 1 billion MP3s being sold every day, which is the crappiest file system for audio in the world. So nobody cares. We'll get a few people like us who are audiophiles who just don't love the sound, but I don't think there's a market here. But do me a favor, stop sending me WAV files, because we were doing this with WAV files. Compress it and send it to me as an MP3. And so when he did that, something counterintuitive happened. It sounded better after compression than before compression, which doesn't make a lot of sense from a science standpoint. How does less data get you better fidelity, right? And so this is when, the kid from the neighborhood pops up. Oh, okay, I could put two things together. I could do something with this. Let me go to my boys over at Tidal or at Spotify. If I can make it sound better and use less data, that means all your data charges that you get pinged on, I can reduce that. Never mind how it sounds. I can actually have cost savings, which is the premise for most businesses that I start, right? Yeah. And so we went on that path. I went out and got the process was patented. I went and got some attorneys and spent some money and got it in, got an incorporation, went and got the process patented, found that we had discovered a huge universe of the frequency enhancement space that hadn't been tapped into. That's close to new art as an IP attorney could find. So it was interesting. So now, as most, entrepreneurial stories, then, stuff hits the fan, right? Great. Got this IP. We're ready to go. Let's write some software to do it. Okay. The problem was that 80% of what we were doing was us. 20% was the technology or the innovation. And what I mean by us is we were manipulating music where we knew what the music was, right? So if it's Empire State of Mind, we know it's going to come in. We know when the bass is going to drop. We know when the lyrics are coming in, because we know that we're bending the frequencies based on this knowledge. Okay. So we got to hit with curveball. At least I did. I said, for me to automate this in software, I'm going to have to find someone who understands intelligence, artificial intelligence, as it relates to signal processing. So basically, I'm trying to duplicate what we were doing in the studio, just replace our brains with AI. Yeah. Which I thought was going to be an easy thing. I go find some scientist that understands AI, get them on board, code this thing up. I'll be selling into the Spotify's and the the titles in this, Pandora's of the world in 2 weeks, right? What we found, at least what I found, was that there were only 3 people on the planet that had both disciplines of artificial intelligence and signal processing, because they're 2 different types of sciences, the 2 different mathematical equations. One's discrete math, one's continuous math. They don't usually live in the same scientists, because one is very predictive and very math driven, which is signal processing, and one is more inferencing in this box of nefarious type of decisions that are being made in software. So traditionally, when you study, you don't study both because they're counterintuitive. You go in different directions.
Got it.
So I found one person who happened to be in Boston. I happened to be in Boston. He happened to be at BU. My buddy happens to be a professor at BU. And so I had access, and I went and pitched him writing software for this, and read all his papers. He was doing a lot of work in neuroscience, which I thought was very parallel to what we were doing in audio signals, and was able to convince him to start writing the software. And this is a long way of getting to your question around starting Yobe. What we found was what we had discovered in the studio around frequency enhancement solved the problem he had for 30 years in the AI signal processing arena, which is what happens when you aggressively process signals. What traditionally happens, you end up damaging the signal that you want to pay attention to, because it's almost like you're ripping apart the data to get rid of the noise or the background, but you're damaging what you really want to keep anyway.
Sure.
So what we thought was an enhancement solution really ended up being a repair solution. So the net is we could separate and manipulate frequencies, and then in a broadcast studio way, kind of post-produce those. Everything that we damaged gets built back in and even enhanced. And so along the way, we figured that music wasn't moving the needle. We were in deep talks with Pandora. They were, listen, we got bigger fish to fry. We have to pay royalties. We don't care about fidelity. And I was tracking a small company called Amazon. And I had a belief that the voice genie was out the bottle. It's not going anywhere. So we just did a huge pivot from music into voice. I said, listen, let's double down on this thing. And what we found was our solution was uniquely suited for the voice problem.
Wow.
So long way of answering a question, some people start with an idea and they build an empire around that idea. This was a kind of a more of a twist and turned in a roundabout way. And where we ended up was exactly where we were tracking the market. And then the innovation really was pivoting into a space where, okay, I'm going to make a bet that the voice thing is going to be around for a while.
Sure.
And we made a good bet.
Definitely. So what are some ways that your software can be used for, like in a B2C space and in B2B?
Well, B2C, we're going to sell to incumbents that sell to you, so, we work with, companies that are in your house right now. Right. And they're using voice for you to interface with them to a certain degree, or they're rolling out their voice platforms. Right. So we don't go directly to consumer. We're dealing with companies that want to put voice into their ecosystem. Right. And they want you to be able to communicate with your device with voice. So, what that means is, as voice now starts to become a little more adopted outside of just your smart speaker, there's something in the science called this, it's called the cocktail party problem. It doesn't sound scientific, but it is the problem, right? Which is the ability for us as humans to hear and focus on a specific person of interest in a noisy environment, i.e. a cocktail party, right? So if you think about that dynamic, you're at, let's take it to a more relevant, because I don't think anybody's been in a cocktail party since the 50s. So you're at the club, right? Let's get to it, right? You're having a conversation. There's a lot of things going on, right? Glasses are banking, the music is loud, people are talking. You can still pay attention to the person that's speaking to you. Where if you had a signal price, if you have an Alexa device or Siri, you understand it's not going to work in that environment. Just forget about it, right? But because we have the ability to use cognizance, intelligence, we can focus on that voice of interest. This is something that voice technologies can't do, and they don't do it well. So what we've been able to do, and this relates to what we're basically selling to the market, what we've been able to do is duplicate the human auditory system as it relates to voice. And what that means is we get a lot of metadata from a voice that we take for granted as humans, that machines have no capability to do. For example, take the exact same club scenario.
Yeah.
If someone comes in behind you and they scream fire, let's figure out what has happened. You figured out that that person is directly behind you. You didn't have to turn your head. So you already know what we call geolocation, you know, direction of arrival, just by hearing the word. You know if it was a man or a woman. You know if it was an adult or a child. You know if they were joking or they were serious. All of that you figured out in one word. We're pulling that metadata out of voice and we're making it commercial. So our argument is that when you talk to your Alexa device, you talk to Siri, it should, they should know it's you. That's called voice biometrics, which is not difficult to do, but it's hard to do in noisy environments. It should know your intent, your emotional state. If you have one of these voice devices, if I'm asking you to turn on the lights 3 times and you hear that I'm a little bit upset, you should let me know that you know I'm upset.
Right.
At least say, sorry, Ken, forgive us, something that a human would basically respond to. So what we're trying to do is create a more human interface using voice, and the ability to bring the metadata from voice allows machines to be a little bit more intelligent in the way that they interact with us.
Interesting. Quick question. So something you mentioned was like, for going back to the club example, if somebody yells fire, you can tell whether they're serious or not, right? So in some ways, can it tell, can it decipher like dishonesty, and can it be used in like as a lie detector in some cases?
So I'll be careful how I say this. We work with a 3-letter agency that's based in Washington. And we do not do that because that is kind of on secrecy and you know, just what do you call it? Security rights that we have as citizens of this country. You can't do that.
Okay.
And a lie detector is way too aggressive. We don't go into the security or surveillance arena with that solution. We use it more in commercial applications. For example, there's a media company out there that envisions a day that you get into your car and you say, play me music. And they want to know, well, who's asking me to play the music? Because they want to know what the playlist is going to be. They want to know what environment you're in. Are you in the car? Are you at home? Because that has something to do with how they pick what they're going to play to you. And they want to get a high level understanding of your emotional state. Are you happy? You're sad? You're motivated? And then they want to take that and crunch all those numbers in a high computationally expensive solution in the web on a cloud. And then they want to recommend a song to you and have that song be perfectly suited to what you just asked, say, play me a song. So that's where voice is going. It's not, you know, just a interesting UI voice interface. User interface that replaces a keyboard. There's a lot more nuance to it. And the challenge that the technology has is that humans speak to humans all the time. We know how the communication module is supposed to work, right? That's why we get annoyed with our devices, because they don't respond to us in a way a human would. Right? So that's what we're allowing from our software state. We don't do the back end heavy lifting that a Google does or Amazon. That's not what we do. What we do is we clean up the front end and we pass along the metadata, the inferencing and the intelligence in the voice to back-end systems that use it for whatever they want to use it for. That's up to them. We just empower them to work in those, what we call everyday noisy environments, and we give them the extra data for them to be a little bit more, a little bit more configured, a little bit more customized to the actual user and what the user is trying to accomplish by talking to the device.
The more I listen to what you're saying about where things are going, the question comes to mind: are the robots about to take over?
Well, you know, that genie's out the bottle. That's not my fight. Skynet is already here, in my opinion. But you know, there is a lot of convenience to be had, not when you have machines think for you, but when you have machines be a little bit more intuitive to what you actually need them to do, right? And we see this a lot happening in the advertising space. So advertisers and marketers are really getting bullish on voice, specifically because the way that we've basically matured into the advertising space is a little aggressive and it's intrusive, right? So if you think about pop through ads or click up ads, whatever they call them, I forget the name of them.
Pop up.
Those, distract you. There's spam all over your screen.
Yeah.
But what we found was the transition from click through to speak through. So what is speak through? Speak through is when I suggest something to you using voice. Hey, Tony, the next season of Star Trek is on NBC. Do you want to take a look? Like, yeah. Advertising's moving into this more suggestive type of way of communicating with you. And because we've learned how to ignore things all the time, it's not intrusive. I'm like, sure. And I can decide if I'm going to pay attention or if I'm not.
Right.
Whereas a pop-up, you totally dominate my screen.
Yeah.
Get in the way of whatever media I was trying to consume.
Right.
It doesn't feel good. Whereas the other feels a little bit more, okay, and then I can guide you. So now if you take that interface with the ability to use, huge AI platforms to recommend things to you that are basically what you want to see. It's almost like what the Google engine does after you search. Now you use that to make sure that whatever I'm asking you is relevant to my information I have on you.
So it could be like a recommendation, or basically telling you when the next season of a show that you watch is
that you've already watched already, right? And for me, that's a great use case, right? Because I'll find out 2 weeks after the show that I've been tracking is on, right? Because I don't have time to figure out, where it is. But those type of things, if you make that intuitive, something like, oh, Ken, by the way, do you know that it's your anniversary next week? That would be immensely helpful for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Go get a gift now, buddy.
Right. Exactly. And it's those type of kind of interactions where technology can basically help you make your life more efficient. And you have a way of basically making sure that you can tweak the parameters around those suggestions, just like you can, with your Netflix subscription, right? Or your Spotify subscription. And there's some engines, and I use Spotify as an example, their recommendation algorithms are fantastic. Like if you really think about the ability for them to extrapolate a channel based on your playlist, and it be kind of spot on to the groove of that playlist, there's a lot of AI in that, right? And that's the foundation for this recommendation engine that I'm talking about. Not their particular algorithms, but the industry as a whole.
Gotcha. So switching gears a little bit, like I know that you are passionate about passing on knowledge to the next generation. Could you talk a little bit about your activities when it comes to like mentorship and your reason for getting into that?
Yeah, so I started a program at the Boys and Girls Club I was part of in the project that I grew up in, simply to try to talk to the kids around how the environment that we are from doesn't disadvantage you in business. It actually helps you in business, right? And it's not the messaging that's coming across, right? The messaging is that you're at a disadvantage in every turn because of the neighborhood you grew up in. I would argue that is not the case, that you are actually empowered and you're given enough tools to go out and be an entrepreneur, whether you realize it or not. It was a Shark Tank type of program. I was dealing with kids who were in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Most people don't realize that we watch Shark Tank. We like Shark Tank. I'm talking about we people of color. We watched the show. And the kids did. And so we had them come up with their business ideas. We had to, talk about what's a business model, how do companies make money? And we gave examples of 4 kind of verticals of companies and talk about how they make their revenue and what their business models were. Had the kids go out, had to come up with their own ideas for their businesses. We flushed them out, got the revenue models together, had them go get business cards. So they got their business cards. Then they had to put together a pitch deck, and then they had to pitch myself and a couple of colleagues. And everybody won, obviously. But, it was an interesting exercise in telling or letting kids know that you have the tools and you have the business. There's enough opportunities for us to help our own community to start businesses out of it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Mhm.
Simple things could be fixed and you can monetize that. So that was, I was trying to push. For me, just a high level story, you know, I remember the year I was 10 years old. I have an older cousin I was really close to. We were at home in his apartment with his two siblings, and it was, you know, a tough time in a month for everybody. You know, you open up the fridge and, you know, there's not a lot of stuff looking back at you, right? And so it was in the middle of a blizzard. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. And so blizzard storm, we're all trapped in a house, not a lot of goodies in the house to eat. I'm 10, my cousin's about 14 at the time, he's 4 years older than me. He said, come on, Kenny, we're going to go out, we're going to make some money. And this was a foreign concept to me. I didn't understand, what do you mean we're going to go make money? You go get a job, that job pays you once or twice every 2 weeks or whatever the case might be. And that was the process that I was indoctrinated to. I didn't understand this thing of go make money.
Yeah.
Right. So the gig was, I was going to go up to the houses and knock on a door and talk, you know, proper, because I went to proper schools. And I was going to convince the people to let us shovel their driveway for $20 because it was in the middle of a snowstorm. Now, this is unbeknownst to me, like how this is going to work. But, you know, he's my big cousin. I do what I'm told because there's consequences if you don't. And so we out in the snow and I'm ringing the doorbells. Hi, ma'am, blah, 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 blah. We made like $220 that day, right? And so we go to the grocery store fully knotted, rolled, right? It changed my entire life. It was the first time I understood that I could wake up in the morning with absolutely no money in my pocket, go do something and control my destiny by the end of the day. If I can basically instill that, the kids from the neighborhood I'm from, and they can do it. And there's other ways to do that. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's other stuff in the neighborhood that has the exact same dynamic to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. I was just too young to be exposed to it. But what it told me was there's a lot of things you can do. So you're not a captive to your circumstance. There's always a hustle that you can go out there and you can go out and you can make yourself, might not make $220 in one day, but I mean, my cousin was a hustler and I had no problem talking to people. So we had a good combination. So you get yourself a business partner that has a skill set you don't have, which my cousin is a boss. He is legitimately a boss. He knew this kid talks better than I do. I get him to talk. And they always gonna say, oh, the little kid is knocking on the door. Oh, sure.
Right.
He knew it. And he was the work. He was going out, he was doing most of the heavy lifting with shoveling. And if we can understand how to look at others in our community and figure out, okay, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, how can we partner and collectively do something? We can get from point A to point B faster. So if I can instill that to the younger generation, then I think it's incumbent on me to do so.
No, that's great. That's great. So where do you see your business, I guess, in the next maybe like 5-10 years? What are your future plans?
Oh no, man, somebody's gonna buy me way before 5-10 years. I mean, so that's the goal.
Right.
The goal is to monetize this thing, ramp it up to a point where it becomes interesting to one of the companies we're either engaged with or another company. You know, yeah, we could end up, you know, locking in and building a brand. I'm not sure that's the path of our company. But yeah, you know, we are going to end up being a very relevant part of the voice ecosystem. It'll be very difficult for you to be successful in noisy environments like outdoors or inside of a concert hall or anywhere you have noise without a solution like ours. And the intelligence that we're offering in the metadata should put us in a position that in the next, you know, 3 to 5 years, someone's going to want to acquire it. And then, you know, we can go off and build another one of these in a different space, right? And that's the one thing that I'm trying to get across to the kids as well. I wish somebody would have taught me this startup game much earlier in life.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's easy because it's the most difficult thing you will ever do. But if you're built for that, there's a whole way of creating generational wealth that we just are not exposed to. And once you get the machine, you find out how to basically manage investors, how to build and scale companies, to put yourself in markets that are going to have some margins for you to get return, X on your investment of time and your money. It becomes a lifestyle, right? Where you meet people. I meet people every day. They are on their third, fourth, fifth, rollout, right? And and you get to do what you love to do. Nobody's forcing me to come to my office and run my business. It's not a job, right?
Right.
That's the one thing I wish I would have been exposed to, that way of creating revenue and building a legacy earlier on in life. Not that my career in finance wasn't fun and it wasn't great, but this is definitely a lot more suited to my core competency. And so that's all I was trying to get kids to understand.
That's great. All right. Well, in wrapping up, thanks for chatting with me. Tell everyone, how can they support or how can they find you if they want to get in contact with you?
Oh yeah, we live on LinkedIn. We don't do a lot of social media in the other gear. I think we're on Twitter. I think my people have us on Twitter, but we're on LinkedIn. Find us at Yobe Inc. on LinkedIn. We have a website, yobeinc.com. And you'll start to see some of our stuff on products that you end up buying or platforms you end up downloading on your cell phone. And we're quiet. It's not going to be a big brand. It'll just be your thing works because we're in it.
Powered by Yobe.
Yeah, one day we'll get to that point. Right now, the big brands don't want to share that they don't want to share the bling, right? So they want to keep it underneath the hood.
Gotcha. So you're white labeling right now.
Yeah, well, we're still ours. We just can't put it on on the front part, right? Not there. We haven't gotten that. We're not Intel. We can't bully you up like that yet.
Sure. Yeah,
maybe one day, but we're working on it. But we'll be out there and we're going to be public facing in a lot of different ways and a lot of different platforms.
That's great. That's great. Well, Ken, thanks again for taking the time to chat, and we'll talk soon.
Good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.